Hello there, and you're welcome to another educative and informative episode of AAU Talks. And as you know it, we inform to transform. And my name is Agyemang Okyere Darko. And you know, there's a very important saying that the future belongs to those who prepare for it. Yes, and I know you have to prepare enough. And for AAU, we are preparing our continent for the best. And with regards to the best, we're looking at how we can prepare very experiential and important educators for the future, the best of it. And today I have a very magnificent guest with me in the house to talk about this topic to the latter. I know you enjoy it. So don't go anywhere. We'll go for a quick pause. And when we come back, I'll let you know who she is and what's the discussion about. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to AAU Talks as we inform to transform on AAU TV. My name is Agyemang Okyere Darko, and you're welcome to today's episode. And we're talking about preparing Africa's future educators, the kind that are creative, experienced, and the best for the kids to grow with more experience and knowledge. So we're meeting in the house today. It's a very magnificent guest, as I mentioned earlier, and she is a member of the Diaspora. Want to welcome Malaika Scott.
Thank you so much
Malaika,
for having me.
Welcome to AAU Talks.
Thank you so much for having me.
Great.
You.
I want to begin because we want to know you a little bit more.
Sure.
So tell us a little bit about Malaika Scott. Who is she and what does she do?
Okay. First of all, I just want to say thank you so much for inviting me to AAU. It's wonderful to see an organization that's dedicated and committed to improving the educational outcomes on the continent. So, who is Malaika Scott? I am an educator in the UK.
Yeah.
I'm passionate about education at large, but particularly passionate about improving educational outcomes in developing countries. I don't like to use that term, developing countries, even though that is something that we do use in, geographical discourses. But I think more than anything, it's about just recognizing that each country has its unique contexts, and I'm passionate about ensuring how we can work together to improve and unlock the potential of pupils in these countries.
Yeah, you seem so passionate about teaching and educators. So
Absolutely.
We'll dig deep into how did you end up in the diaspora? It's a very, very curious one.
Okay. I'm originally from the island of St. Lucia. My mum moved to the UK when we were young, and obviously we followed her. And ever since then, I've been living in the UK and was educated there, and I'm currently working there as well.
So
yes.
Your path to education, how does that, there are numerous careers out there, but you chose education.
Yes.
What inspired you?
What inspired me? When I was in primary school, I had a fantastic teacher. Her name is Mrs. Nicole Dundas.
Okay.
She's originally from Sierra Leone. And I was fascinated to see how this woman was able to ignite a love for learning in her students.
Okay.
For us, coming to school was more than just learning maths and English. It was an experience. She'd ignited a love for learning in us, and we loved coming to school because of that.
That's great.
Today, she's still a very good friend of mine. Her daughter is also my best friend. So I think seeing Mrs. Nicole Dundas' passion in the classroom and how she was able to ignite a love for learning in her students stayed with me. And then I moved on to university and, discovering yourself, discovering more of your passions and what inspired you. And development was something that was very interesting to me, developing countries.
Yeah.
But I think more than anything, I realized that the fundamental base to developing a country is education.
Yeah.
Is actually tapping into the human potential that exists in each country. So I guess it was seeing Mrs. Nicole Dundas and then also having an understanding of development as a discourse, and then thinking, okay, what can make a country develop? And for me, education seemed like natural and fit. And then I went on to pursue teacher education.
Okay.
And I've worked in various different secondary schools as a teacher. Then I've moved up to middle management.
Okay.
I then went on to do a master's in education and educational research. And one of the things that I looked at was inclusive curriculum design and delivery.
Great.
So how can we make our curriculums inclusive for students from various learning abilities and cultural backgrounds? So I guess, that was a period of time where I was able to develop my pedagogical skills and therefore can use it to educate others.
Great.
Yes. During the COVID pandemic, I also started my own tuition company because I realized that a lot of students from disadvantaged backgrounds were actually losing out because they couldn't perhaps access virtual lessons and things like that. So I found creative ways to mobilize a team of volunteers to help to meet that need.
Right. That's fantastic.
Yes.
Well, let's move on to the preparation for Africa's future educators.
Yes.
We're looking at the kind of educators that are so impactful, experienced, and have unique ways of doing things.
Yes.
What is your ideal standard for an educator in these times?
Well, I think more than anything, we have to invest in ourselves. I always say that you need to master your craft. So whilst we are educators, we are also learners.
Yeah.
So in order to meet the needs of your students, you need to be a learner.
Okay.
My students always say to me, but Miss, you're such an inspiration. I said, I'm not the inspiration. You are my inspiration.
Okay.
Because in order for me to be inspirational, I need to find the inspiration from you and know what it is. What are your needs? So I think more than anything, a really good educator has to love their and be passionate about young people.
Yeah.
Must find out what it is that makes young people enjoy learning. What do I need to do as an educator to upskill myself in order to meet the needs of students perhaps who don't speak English, or a student who has a learning difficulty, or a student who's really, really brilliant, or a student who excels in maths, or a student who actually maybe academics is not their strong point, but they are great in the performing arts. Or they're more vocational. They're good with their hands. Or they're real problem solvers. So we teachers are very skilled people.
You have to know all these, identify all these areas. And then
absolutely. So essentially, the future educators need to be learners. And they need to recognize that in order for me to be impactful in the classroom, for my students, I need to develop my craft. And I need to develop my craft in order to ensure that those students are, perform effectively, whatever their unique skills are. So.
But you mentioned that an educator must be able to assess students or pupils based on their abilities, problem solving, uniqueness, creativity. Can you actually do this if you're not a creative person as an educator? How do you work it out?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Like I said, if you are a passionate educator, you will find ways to make those students who are creative successful. You may not be creative yourself, but there will be somebody else within your organization who is. You want to nurture that person's skills so that they can, maybe take on the role of developing the performing arts or the arts and crafts or whatever. Or you might have somebody in the organization who's an excellent mathematician. You want to nurture the talent in your organization to therefore meet the needs of the students. Not one teacher can make an impact, but it's a collective. Yeah. So for me, it's about working together collaboratively, recognizing what our unique skills are, and understanding that we have a really dynamic and diverse student body. And how can we, therefore, learn about each of those and use our skills effectively?
Yeah, I believe people are being inspired right now by the passion you bear for educators. So tell us, how, in your own view, how do you work it out? What are your skills for bringing out the experiential learning?
Yes. I always say to students that, first of all, the first thing for me is inspiring a love for learning. Okay. I saw Mrs. Nicole Dundas do that very well. She had a group of students who perhaps were labeled disadvantaged, but because we loved the experience that we got when we went to school, we wanted to engage. Okay. We gave her the respect that she deserved. Yeah. We engaged with the learning that we were given because she inspired a love for learning and a thirst for knowledge and whatever it was that we were passionate about. But I think what's really key as well is that sometimes students don't understand the value of what they're learning. Okay. Yeah. So you might say, oh, why do we need to learn algebra or subtraction or multiplication? Yeah. It's because you need it in real life. And what I tend to do with my students is something that I call experiential learning. Okay. I make them understand that what you're learning in the theory, you're going to need in practice in real life. So you're going to need to learn how to use your mathematical skills to go to the supermarket. Okay. So let's go to the supermarket. We take a trip to the supermarket. Oh, yes. I'll join you guys. We take a trip to the supermarket and I give them a certain amount of money and a scenario. Yeah. And I say, you have 3 children or you have 5 children and you have also your extended family to support. What are you going to buy? Okay. Yeah. Or another example could be, you've got a mortgage to buy, you need to buy a house. Yeah. What salary do you need in order to get the right mortgage? Or what interest rate would be suitable for you? Yeah. So I guess really it's about ensuring that we make learning fun. Not always learning is fun, but it's real. Students must be able to experience and put what they learn into practice. Okay. Yeah. So even in, I specialize in geography education. Some of the things that I tend to do with my students is not just assess them on, a question and just an extended answer. And anybody can regurgitate knowledge. If you learn it, you can apply it. But what's even a higher order of thinking is giving students a problem or a scenario and saying to them, okay, here is a country. These are some of the issues. What would you do to improve that specific country or that context? So you give them projects, okay? We call that inquiry. So give them a question, or an inquiry-based project to solve. Yeah. That's something that I like to do. And also I get students to do presentations, develop their communication skills, their interpersonal skills. Sometimes I get them to do this. We call it BBC News. BBC News Round. That's amazing. And they have to interview each other on a specific topic. All right. You'll really see if the student knows the topic or not then, So, just finding different ways to bring out the best in your students. And it doesn't always have to be, a question and they answer it. But there are other skills that they need to develop.
A quest to solve a problem.
A quest to solve a problem.
Well, I think that's amazing.
Yes.
But let's find this way. We're now done with that. Let's look at assessment.
Yes.
Every student has their own ability and capacity. Some can learn, but quite hard to express.
Yes.
Some too can express, but quite hard to express well.
Yes.
How do you assess them based on their capacity and the best way for them to move on?
Okay. So I guess you're asking, how do we assess pupils?
Yeah.
Okay.
Performance-based or other criteria?
Sure. Usually it is performance-based. We live in a society where performance counts. Okay. Yes. And however, how the students get to that end, result depends. So in the UK, they have something called coursework. So they might say, okay, you've got to create a coursework or a project, and that's worth 50% of your end of unit grade.
Okay.
And then the other 50% is the end of unit exam. Yeah. In other subjects like the languages, students may be assessed on how well they're able to communicate verbally, then also in their reading, and also in their writing, and also in their listening. And I think we can learn from that as well. Yeah. And not just always base it on that end of unit assessment, even though I think, of course, end of unit assessments are very appropriate in being able to assess how well the student has learned topics. Yeah. But there are also other ways to assess students, whether it be through presentations, extended writing projects and essays. Yeah, but of course, the standard method of assessing students is a end of unit exam.
Yeah, you know, one of the most asked questions is, what were you doing during the COVID-19 time where things were so hard? How were you teaching?
Yes.
And Ghana was terrible, you know.
Yes.
How were you managing it as an educator where you were?
Well, you know, I'm privileged enough to work in the private sector.
Okay.
But I also think that the way we dealt with it was quite common in terms of even the public sector, because we have the technologies available. So what we did was we were teaching remotely online. And I would say that I had about 90% attendance, 95% attendance.
Okay.
And it's because the students in my context had laptops. They had the Microsoft Teams program available.
Available data.
Available data, Wi-Fi. So they were able to access those lessons and engage pretty easily.
Great.
However, we also understand that there were some students, like I said, I opened my own tuition company to meet that need, who didn't have the Wi-Fi connections or the technologies. You know, some students, their parents have 4 children, 1 laptop. And also if their mum is at home and trying to use the laptop, how can the children engage with those online lessons? Yeah. And also one has to take into consideration not just the technologies, but also the well-being of parents and students during that time. Yeah. We found that a lot of students were disengaged, not only because they were not able to access the technologies and the online lessons, but because they were going through their own emotional turmoil. Okay. Yeah, because being in lockdown was a completely new experience. Sure. We were, you know, students weren't allowed to leave their homes. Yeah. And I think that it also opened up a whole new conversation about pupil well-being and mental health.
You know, that's quite unusual, but when you come into contact with students who are not so brilliant, so we'll say, in your group.
Yes.
As you mentioned that.
Yes.
These are very unique groups of people that have to also progress. How do you handle that? What method do you use?
Yes. So one of the things that we use in the UK, it's called differentiation. Okay. So that's the sort of theoretical term for differentiating your pedagogy. Okay. Some of the ways in which we can differentiate is by perhaps giving a student who may have a learning difficulty or English as a second language, a different worksheet. Okay. Or when you're teaching, you ensure that you have a word bank, a list of words that students may be able to include. Okay. You give them what's called write-in frames. So you might give them a starting sentence of how they might start that sentence, what you're looking for in a particular paragraph. Yeah. So differentiation looks differently depending on, you know, what you're teaching. It could be that you give students a worksheet that's different, you know, has writing frames and sentence starters on it, and the other students don't have that. Okay. Yeah. Or you have a student who's got English as a second language, and you may have a vocabulary book and translation. You might have dictionaries available for them. Yeah. Okay. You might decide to group students in the classroom according to their ability on different tables. It really depends. And I would, you know, need to see the context.
Sure, that's amazing. Thanks so much for joining us. And this AAU Talks, and we inform to transform. We're discussing Preparing Africa's Future Educators. I'm here with Malaika Scott, and it's been amazing. Don't go anywhere. We'll go for a quick pause. We'll be right back and talk more about her mission in Ghana with regards to education. Welcome back to AAU Talks, and if you just joined us, my name is Agyemang Okyere Darko, and we're discussing preparing Africa's future educators, and I'm here with a very magnificent educator in the person of Malaika Scott. And Malaika, when I talk about how, you're from St. Lucia, and then you went to the UK, and now you're in Ghana, like what's brought you to Ghana? What's the connection right there?
Right, okay. I was very fortunate enough to have gained entry to the prestigious School of Oriental and African Studies in the UK.
Sure.
I did my undergraduate there, as well as King's College University. So I majored in geography at King's College University, but I also had the wonderful opportunity of studying African Studies at the School of Oriental and African Studies. And there I had the privilege of being lectured by Dr. Kwadwo Osenyame Jr. And as you know, Dr. Kwadwo is a Ghanaian. He was a real inspiration to many of us who were, of the diaspora. We learned African history, not just on, history of Africa, but also African American history, Caribbean history. It was a really, I would say, empowering experience.
Great.
Because it was the first time that I'd actually ever learned about, African writers. Dr. Kwadwo introduced us to people like Chinua Achebe, Senghor, Dembout Samara Chera. He's a Zimbabwean writer. Emma Césaire from Senegal. Frantz Fanon, Martinique. We learned about the Pan-African movement. We learned about negritude. And those were things that were completely novel to us. I'd never read anything like that. So I think from there, it developed my curiosity about Africa. And then also, as a majoring in geography and specializing in development as well. Again, it seemed like a really natural fit.
Place. Amazing. So with your background, your passion, what are some of the observations you've seen in the African Ghanaian education setting that you think is a lack?
Yes, I mean, I've spoken to quite a few people who work in the public sector, and they've shared their experiences with me. And I think some of the key things or issues, so to speak, are huge class sizes. So not being able to perhaps cater to those different needs. Not having the knowledge and experience of how to deal with students who perhaps have learning difficulties. What are the techniques to use? So sometimes those students kind of fall through the net, so to speak, or are excluded or marginalized. For me, that's so heartbreaking because they are capable of learning and really being successful if you know the right techniques to use. Sometimes teachers have mentioned lack in resources, learning materials. So there may be one textbook for a class of 50. Those are some of the issues they're facing. Not having the writing materials, other equipment. And also they've expressed not themselves feeling perhaps as equipped as they could be. So yes, they have the initial teacher training, but whether or not there's an ongoing training program available to them, not necessarily. The quality assurance, so the monitoring evaluation of pedagogical practices, and also leadership within schools. So those are some of the things. And also sometimes they say that the national curriculum might change, but the textbook is not in alignment with the national curriculum. So being able to deliver without any...
Being pretty laid back.
Yes, it can be quite difficult.
You know, let me point to a recent displeasure for students, teacher students, basically in the academies.
Yes.
They said that they have to write a licensure examination,
Yes.
which is quite not so common to
Yes.
them because
Yes.
it's quite a big hurdle for them to cross.
Yes.
From your experience,
Yes.
is it really important for there to be a final licensure examination to guarantee you to teach?
Right. So based on my experience in the UK, all teachers must have a degree.
Yeah.
You then also have to go through teacher education, and you set assignments. You do a very basic, well, not basic, but a certain level of maths, English test of skills. And unless you pass that, you cannot really be an educator. I think that it is valuable for teachers to have a certain level of competence, of course. Like I said initially, for me, the best teachers are learners. You must constantly be looking for ways to improve your craft in order for you to deliver effectively. Yes. So do I think that it's important for educators to be assessed? Yes, I do.
Let's not talk about the future.
Yes.
Now, what is your view of the future and the ideal teacher to fit or educator to fit that kind of future?
Wow. First of all, I think COVID-19 has brought a lot of new things to the educational realm, and one of that is digital technology, technology.
Yeah.
So I think one of the key things for Africa's future educators is having that competence in digital literacy. So that's something that I think is really important. That doesn't mean that we completely throw away the traditional methods of teaching and learning. Absolutely not. Those are the fundamentals, your bread and butter. They work. And it's just now a question of being flexible and learning how to incorporate those into the technical or the digital age. I think that the future educators need to be developing students who are problem solvers, who are critical thinkers, who, alongside your maths, English and science and all that, who have soft skills, who are excellent communicators, who are entrepreneurs, who have a level of ingenuity, because, the problems are vast and they require different methods to tackle them.
Yeah.
So for me, the future educators in Africa and the world need to be developing young people who have those kind of hard skills, but also those softer skills. And we should be encouraging students to think critically, encouraging students to engage with the world. That is a huge problem. So they must have those problem-solving skills. And those are just a few things, that I'll just share with you now.
Yeah, sure. And I think in sharing, there's one more thing that everybody wants you to share with them.
Yes.
Like, if you have students in the classroom and you met them for the first time,
Yes.
what would be your first approach to identifying that you are this, you are that, and this is what I'm going to do to teach you? Wow.
That's a really lovely question. I think one of the key things is building relationship. Students have to feel comfortable in your care.
Okay.
Teachers, we're not just educators. We are carers. Yes. And if a student feels like they are cared for, that they've got a good relationship with you, then they will be able to open up. And then you as an educator can then assess what their different needs are. So for me, it's about building a positive relationship with your students, one of trust, mutual respect, and then we take it from there.
Great.
Yes. Whether you can do that in a day and how you will do that, I'm not sure I can answer on that.
Yeah.
But fundamentally, it's about building a positive relationship with your students.
One more thing comes to mind is that kind of bias for actually in terms of being proactive to new pedagogy.
Yes.
In any situation you find yourself.
Yes.
How would you talk about that? Should we plan or adapt one particular pedagogical skill, or we should be open to multiple? And from our own ingenuity.
Yes.
Just bring something up and then.
Yes. I always say there are fundamentals. There are fundamental pedagogical practices. However, each school context is different. A rural school and an urban school, they work in different contexts. What skills that we would need to implement for the students in those areas are going to be different to what you would perhaps employ in an urban setting.
I'd love to also feel the urban style,
Of course.
I aspire to be one.
Of course. However, does everybody need to move from the rural areas to urban areas?
Not really.
Exactly. So I think, here we come with, these misconceptions as well that, all rural students need to move to urban areas. You'll see that there's going to be a huge gap. Africa is one of the fastest urbanizing areas. Nigeria is said to be one of the fastest urbanizing populations. Yeah. But that leaves this disparity in rural areas. There's potential in the rural areas. If everybody flocks to urban areas, we're going to have a disparity. And anybody who works in development will tell you that, it's not just about one area. It's not just about one place or one child. It's about a collective. Yes. So I think I employ that even when we think about geography. Rural areas have potential. It's about what is the potential in those areas and how do we develop it.
Great.
Yes. So I guess what I'm trying to say is those students in rural areas, they will get the same standard, but the context that they exist is quite different. So agricultural production and getting those students to engage with that is really important. Your urban areas can't eat if your rural areas
don't supply. That's a point.
We need to ensure that maybe if those are what those young people are interested in, we develop those skills alongside the other, urban urban skills.
There's this teacher who I think featured by the BBC. He engages the students in dancing competitions.
Absolutely.
And people find that quite awkward because it's their education or not dance teaching.
Yes.
But what do you think about that? Is this really something we should encourage?
So important. It's so important. The extracurricular skills, the sports, performing arts, classical music is a very intellectual process. Music, the art of learning to read music, it's so good for students. You'll find that in a lot of Western countries, they encourage the arts, they encourage creativity, they encourage students to do extracurricular activities, to strike a balance. The academics is really important, but so are the creative subjects.
Amazing.
Students develop their other skills in those areas. Sports, they learn how to develop teamwork, true sportsmanship, learning to regulate their emotions even when they lose.
True.
Those are important skills to have. When you move into the workplace, there will be people that annoy you. You need to learn how to deal with that.
Sure. Let's send a word of inspiration to educators all over the world, especially in Africa, where your heart is. What do you have to tell them for the future for now?
The future for now, I would say, is you know, develop yourselves. Each and every one of us is, you know, we are capital. We are capital. And when you invest in yourself and you pour into yourself, when your cup is overflowing, you can then pour into others.
Exactly.
So that's the way I see it. As an educator, I am a potential, and I have to unlock that within myself to then be able to pour and unlock that in others. And most importantly, I think educators need to work together. I'm good at certain things, but you'll be good at something else. And when we work as a collective, we can then have a greater impact on our young people. I personally don't see myself as a lone ranger. I love to work as a team. I love to nurture others so that we can all have a, you know, greater influence. It's no use being a lone ranger. You can only do so much. But when you work collectively, you can have a much wider impact.
Great.
So that would be my
Great.
humble advice.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Malaika, for passing by AAU Talks and insightful messages you have right then, experience on how to educate and be their future educator. And I believe you also inspired, like how I am right here, in terms of preparing yourself. And I love the allegory you painted right there, that you should be an overflowing cup of knowledge and passion so you can share to other classroom students who are ready to learn. So thank you so much for that one, and I am so inspired by that one. I'm an educator myself, you know. So that's for this show. We're talking about preparing Africa's future educators, and I think we have really shared with you the nuggets, all the issues that we need to know about future education, and how we need to position ourselves to be the best of future educators. So thank you very much for your time and for the show, and thank you very much for Malaika. So passing by.
Thank you.
Take care. Have a nice day. Bye.